Welcome back, fantasy enthusiasts, to another episode of Discover New Worlds featuring Ryan D. Meier. Today I have a pretty awesome episode with fantasy and sci-fi author Mark Stallings. He comes to us, we talk a lot about his inspirations for his fantasy series, and we talk about a lot of really cool collaborations he's got coming up. It's an episode I know you'll enjoy. Check it out, and I'll see you afterwards. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am so excited to join you again today with another author interview with Mark Stallings. Mark, thanks for joining the program.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no problem. So, I know you as fantasy author. I know you do some sci-fi writing as well. But why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself to the audience?
So my name's Mark Stallings. I live in Colorado, and like you said, I write fantasy, mostly wuxia, which is Asian flavored fantasy. Specifically, if you like magic powered martial arts, then this is probably the genre for you. For science fiction, I've been writing mostly in the Four Horsemen universe. As you can see right here, I got a couple of publications and working on another story in that world, even as we speak.
Beautiful. I love, first off, I'll compliment the artwork. I certainly like the artwork for the science fiction stuff, but when you look on the left side there, I love that. Now, you just mentioned the wuxia concept. Do you find that your artwork obviously the artwork is going to match, but is there a certain style artistically that kind of goes along with that, or?
Well, I mean, when you get into like the Asian themed stories, of course, you're looking for a good background, something that really highlights that this is going to be in the made up world that is wuxia or shanxia. As you can see, like with my first book, The Elements, we have like the pagoda here, and we've got mountains in the background and trees if you look at the full art. So there's like cherry blossoms and things like that, just trying to convey that, hey, this is Asian flavored, and going from there. The second book that is also in process right now, Animals, I based the martial arts style within my series on Xing Yi. And so when you start learning Xing Yi, you start with the elements, and then you move to the animal styles, and then learn weapons and go from there. So it's kind of, I'm trying to have the series progress as our two young heroes get exposed to a much wider world.
Yeah, and it sounds like kind of in the same chronological order that you or I would go through if you were to embark on that journey, it sounds like.
Well, and that was what I was shooting for, is if somebody really wanted to learn Xing Yi, I mean, I guess people don't have phone books anymore, but you could Google in your area an actual Xing Yi studio, and you will learn exactly what I talk about in the book. I mean, I learned it a while back, and I wanted to try to convey that journey. Just it'll take you a little longer to get the magic aspects of it.
Fair enough. So it sounds like, I mean, obviously you have a passion for wuxia, but it sounds like it even goes beyond just you enjoying that type of art. So you said you studied this particular martial art style in the past?
Yep. So I grew up on kung fu theater, all the classic Shaolin movies and the ninja movies of the 80s. And I've been studying martial arts since the late 80s. Started off with Japanese martial arts, Aikido, Shotokan karate, and then moved into the softer arts. I competed nationally in karate, and it's very hard on the body. And unfortunately, at one of the national competitions, that's where I got introduced to a chiropractor to fix my back because of something that happened at the competition. But I wanted to get into Tai Chi. I mean, so with my business partners in my first company that I had, we all did Yang style Tai Chi, and then I got into Xing Yi and Bagua, and then more Chen style Tai Chi, which is actually the martial art aspect of it, where Yang style is more esoteric meditation kind of a thing. It was literally the neutered down version of the martial art. So between that and, trips to Asia, my brother lived in Japan and China, and I had an opportunity to go visit him and get tours of both of those great countries and all of the history. Yeah, just kind of stuck. And so when James Hunter, he's the owner of Shadow Alley Press, he approached me to write wuxia, and we had a great conversation and picked, I think, a good foundation for what is the Silver Coin Saga. And then so the Elements being the first book and Animals the second.
That's so cool. And I know before we got started today, we talked about how we're starting to see some of this come up in more common culture here in America, right? What would be
here's the fun part. You look at, like, everybody knows Dragon Ball Z.
Yes.
So that is classic wuxia.
Okay, how about
martial arts?
What about Avatar: The Last Airbender?
So that's more westernized, but absolutely. I mean, when you still have the Asian flavor, you still have cultivation where they're trying to learn. I would, unfortunately, he learns other powers but doesn't really grow in power because he's the ultimate being. He's the chosen one, the avatar. But if you look at, like, movies, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I mean, that was quite a while ago. And then right now, the movie that's dominating the box office, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I mean, classic wuxia.
Yeah, that's neat. I like you said, you had mentioned some of these things that, I mean, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, like you said, is a little bit older, but that was very popular at it in its own time, for sure. And I remember seeing that. Yeah, so no, that's neat. Now, what else? So one thing that I learned looking at some of the wuxia stuff is it kind of takes a step towards, at least the way I understood it. It reminded me a lot of almost like, and in a different way, of course, it's a different culture, but almost like honor codes, right? It reminded me a lot of some of, like, the samurai concepts. Is that something that you could talk a little bit more about? That's kind of attached to wuxia in itself, right?
So there's always a code of being, right? Morality code. And so really you have two flavors of this kind of wuxia or shansha. And so you have, like, the honor aspect, where it's honoring the family, honoring the king, honoring the art. I mean, getting into that. And so then the other aspect is a quest for perfection or a quest for immortality. And so everything's there, it's all about trying to better yourself as you increase in power and focus, discipline. Then you can achieve enlightenment. And the enlightenment in a lot of the wuxia stuff is you become immortal.
Okay, so that's kind of like the end game for the enlightenment concept. Interesting. Now, you've talked about you had a love for this long before you were writing, right? And obviously these concepts tie heavily into your books. Are there other things specifically other than the physical magic, like when we talk about these steps towards enlightenment, I'm assuming that at least buds of those concepts go on in your book. So the characters, it's not simply necessarily just about the magic system. Is it also aimed at this holistic concept of character growth?
Absolutely. So to start the series, I mean, it's basically two young farm guys who are up in the mountains when their village gets wiped out. And on their way back to the village, they get attacked by the creatures that wiped out the village, and they get rescued by a caravan. And that caravan takes them off to a magic school. And that's where they get exposed. They had never really seen magic before then, and that's where they get exposed. And so initially their goal is, I want revenge. I want to learn, I want power so I can go kill the people that destroyed my village. And then as they go, they start to learn that, hey, I'm not trying to steal from Spider-Man, but ultimately as they gain power, they have to be responsible citizens. And so I have some character driven dynamic where, it's like the classic trope of the class bully. So you get to meet the class bully in book 1, and then the class bully gets some comeuppance in book 2. I don't want to throw out spoilers before it's out, but basically it's a character driven arc. And so I've arced out a number of books in this series, and as long as sales go well, then this could be an 11 book arc. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to see the growth of the individual characters. Even the bully has a redemption arc, if it's all planned out well. That you fall in love with these characters and you get to see their journey. You get to see their happy moments, their sad moments, romantic moments. I'm not going to show that. My romance author friends were giving me a hard time because there's no kissing in the first book. That kind of a thing. I keep it clean. And even if there were to be something, it would definitely be fade to black.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite reviews I've ever received, and it sounds like you'll probably get one too, is it commented on my romance and then how I didn't show any of the good stuff. So it sounds like you're in store for a couple of those reviews on your own stuff.
Yes, I'm gonna keep it light. I mean,
that's right.
I want books that, well, my children are older now, but maybe my grandkids will want to read, or I'll be comfortable with them picking it up and getting into it.
That's a beautiful thing. That's really cool. So inspirations, I always think that's you know what, before I go on, let's tackle one other thing. So we talked a little bit, you mentioned some protagonists, you mentioned a bully who has a potential arc here. What are we talking about for bad guys, right? I want to know. Do we have ultimate evil? Is it
we do have the ultimate evil. There is a supreme big baddie, and you find out in book 1 that the big baddie has 8 generals. And the 8 generals are each trying to lead corrupt forces to subvert society, enslave the countryside and things like that. So what they found out is that one of the 8 generals, Golden Spear, is the one who led the troops that just crushed their village. So in book 1, so here's this, it's slow burn. So in book 1, they learn magic. In book 2, they get better at magic, and in book 3, they're going to go after the general. So it's kind of get their revenge. And unfortunately, once they get this is the complete spoiler without being a true spoiler, is once they defeat one, then they realize if they really want to solve this problem, they're going to have to go after it. And so you talk about inspiration. My inspiration for this long running series, I'm a Robert Jordan fan. I'm excited about the Wheel of Time series coming out, but I read the first 10 books. I made it 10 deep before I got disenchanted with the lack of progress. And so what I wanted to do, and when James and I sat down and we're talking about what I wanted to do with this series, is I basically wanted to have that sense from a reader perspective that there is a sense of accomplishment, that you see Sean, the main character, moving through, and they're going to work on taking down the bad guys in order, in increasing difficulty, as they try to solve a very specific problem you find out about in book 2, to get forces together to go after the big baddie. And so that's the 11 book arc. I mean, in a nutshell. And so, my inspiration for that was the True Wheel of Time series, because at some point Robert Jordan started to undo. I mean, there were 12 Forsaken, and he started bringing them back. And so as a reader, I felt betrayed. I felt that sense of accomplishment that I've been with you on this journey through the first 4 books, that, our hero is taken down these Forsaken, and then all of a sudden they're back. And it's like, what? Really? And then they don't really do anything, right? He doesn't really use them. And then he got sick, and but that's neither here nor there. So that's the goal. Yeah. That's the true inspiration. Is I wanted to write a long-running epic fantasy series leveraging wuxia that scratches the itch. That, when somebody picks up book 10 in this series, they will see the journey that our characters have been on, the good and the bad, and then they know that something good is going to happen at the end of this book. And so that's the other thing is I am, just like what Shadow Alley Press does. I'm a big fan of Marvel Cinematic Universe. I want a hero that's going to ultimately win. He might get the snot beat out of him along the way, but I want that sense of adventure, and I want to keep it light.
I think that that's a core concept that all fantasy readers and writers love, right? Like for me, I need that payoff at the end of a series or at the end of a book. And don't get me wrong, I like some of the dark stuff, the grim dark fantasy too, but I do love when, like you said, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you have bad guys, but in the end, you're going to triumph and good is going to conquer the bad. And that's what I like that too. And I think that that's a core part of fantasy.
Well, and you look at like, a lot of people, give me grief because I'm writing Magic Academy and they're like, oh, Harry Potter. But you look at what J.K. Rowling did with that series, and you come into book 7 and you don't know what kind of ending Harry Potter's going to have. Is he going to make the ultimate sacrifice and his friends are going to live happily ever after? And so you don't know what's going to happen at the end of this series either. I mean, will he defeat the bad guy? Will he learn enough to ascend, get his enlightenment and, move up? I mean, I set kind of the kind of nuggets, if you will, open loops, depends on what you want to call it, where, there are the 5 immortals. So, I mean, there are gods in this world. So are they going to intervene? Probably not, but they might. I mean, it's unknown. But that's the kind of thing, is what kind of sacrifice. You look at Endgame, Iron Man made the ultimate sacrifice.
Yep.
And so everybody's whispering, oh, they're going to bring Iron Man back. Well, are they? Are they really? But does it lessen what actually happened in that movie? I mean, comics killed heroes off all the time, and then they bring them back. I mean, that's their comics. That's what they're supposed to do. Books, we're a little more vicious in that we tend to keep people dead. But you never know.
I would generally, unless you're Robert Jordan, right? Like you talked about.
Well, yeah. I mean, but even then, he had to create a specific power to then completely remove people permanently. I mean, James Hunter with his Viridian Gate Online thing. I mean, it's lit RPG. You get killed, you respawn, right? You're in a video game.
Yeah.
He created a way that characters don't come back if they encounter this one weapon. I mean, so you got to keep the characters or the readers guessing. I mean, it can't be a given that it's like my grandfather was telling me about when my mom was little, and they had the black and white TV, and she was watching the Lone Ranger, and she's like, oh gosh. He's like, it's okay, honey, he'll be on next week. In books, we don't necessarily have that.
No, it's very true. And to keep the reader guessing is what keeps the pages turning,
Oh, absolutely.
I
mean, I don't want it to be a foregone conclusion that yes, in book 11, Sean will defeat everybody and will live happily ever after. No, we see where the pen takes us. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. And the story does, at least in my experience, it can take on a life of its own in some ways. So I'm sure as your series goes, I think the readers will get a feeling for where it's going. You'll ultimately know, but you'll be able to trail them along with some breadcrumbs. And, but to be honest with you, you really need to get yourself a, what would you call a media agent, because from the sound of the lineup, that would make a good video game in itself, where you have this magic learning and then you have these 8 generals. Like that's right up that alley. That would make for a great action
and
RPG.
What's funny is, I'm a software guy. I mean, that's what my career's been in, and literally in my email right now, I got a thing saying, hey, we can help you build. I was like, oh, do I really want to go down that road?
Don't tempt you.
I'm not saying no. I mean, if somebody's out there watching this from any of the big game houses, I'm happy to talk. I'm here.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that I'm filling in as your agent at this point. So I'll see if I could filter. I'll filter some people your way.
So we'll have to, redeem the agent fee in Times Square. We talked about pizza. Yeah, first prize on me.
I'm a simple man. You could fill my belly, and that's payment enough. So we talked. So I'll let you go on that. The wuxia thing is super cool. So for anybody out there, readers, if you're unfamiliar with it, it sounds like we've given you some examples. You got to dive into this because this sounds really neat, and especially I think what always makes fantasy neat is when we're including, because this sounds like you're including a lot of historical things, very accurate, right? So this isn't pure fantasy.
So some of it's accurate, right? Martial arts are going to be almost, especially in the elements, it's very accurate, mostly, showing, how movement happens. And then I start to kind of get away from it, because once we start really injecting magic into this, the animal forms are actual legit animal forms, but the moves that I come up with are based on reality, but heavy magic. I mean, it's a lot of made up stuff. I don't want people, going out looking for the Phoenix spirit and, trying to blast their neighbor. That violates the code.
It does. With great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's talk about landmarks, the setting for the story. Do you find that kept to a historical, or is this new world building?
So that's the whole thing with wuxia and shanxia, is basically, these are genres that have been around for 600 years. And basically they've created this magic, not China land that you get to play in, because the political satire or making a statement about corrupt officials or things like that didn't need to be bled over into the real world. So this became kind of a safe sandbox of things. And so one of the things that I'm done, again, Western wuxia, not classic Chinese wuxia, is that I also introduce other cultures, because having this based in a magic academy, I have instructors from all over. And so, being able to bring in like Western Africa or a Norse person, that kind of a thing, to really add flavor into an exotic world. So they're more exotic, where the Asian flavors down the middle are kind of the standard, if you will. Yeah. So no direct ties to China or specific locations, and the genre does it on purpose, right?
Purposefully. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially when it's coming from, like, I wonder if that influence comes from the concept that it is a Chinese art, if you will.
Well, so there was look at the first two books. I mean, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is very much Chinese oriented, and then Water Song, which is a tale of a bunch of heroes. I think 108 heroes. I mean, and basically, just telling stories about the guy with the meteor hammer, or whatever it might be. Just a variety of different entertaining stories. I kind of weave some of that into the fact that the main character of this book, Sean, our series, he likes to read. He loves those stories. That was his motivation, and then that was his fantasy. And now he's learning that as he's applying magic. And so that's kind of the hook of this magic school is, when you get a failing grade, you don't necessarily survive the experience.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a level of danger we don't experience in the Harry Potter world, so to say.
Exactly. I mean, you see a little bit of it, but they try to shy away from it. But in this one, it's not only are the trials arduous enough to kill you if you don't pay attention or do something stupid, like one kid set himself on fire, but then you find out that somebody's actively trying to kill the main character. I wonder why.
I can't imagine why. Yes, but listen, you got to read to find out.
Got to read to find out.
So this is awesome. let's talk about inspirations beyond some of the wuxia stuff. What are you into? You mentioned Wheel of Time, which I'm sure had a big influence
Oh
on
man.
you.
So
Yeah, what
I was
else?
a
Talk about it.
voracious reader.
Okay.
And so, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a time where you could go to the mall and go to Walden Books or B. Dalton. And
Yeah.
my brother and I would just scan the new releases. So pretty much Lester Del Rey is my hero. I read so much stuff that was published by Del Rey during the 80s. It's ridiculous. And I still have a bunch of it. So, things like Dave Duncan with The Reluctant Swordsman, or David Eddings with The Belgariad, Dennis McKiernan with his, Dark Tower stuff, Barbara Hamley with Time of the Dark. I read everything I could get my hands on. And it's funny because, you think, oh, well, I'm really well read. And so you'd asked before the show, what is it that I'm reading or listening to? I
Yeah.
find that, in talking with other authors, that there's significant books that I missed. I mean, I have no idea. So like recently I just finished up Elizabeth Moon's Paxenarian series. And so she had written the tales of this girl who eventually joins a military unit. It's military fantasy is the categorization. And so she joins this mercenary company and then goes through some trials and ultimately becomes a paladin of this saint who's all about war. And then, here's the real fun part. All of those authors that I read during the 80s, they didn't just kick off. I mean, they've been writing books. And so then we found out that Elizabeth Moon, 20 years after she finished the first series, decided to write a second series set in that same world that picks up right after the first series goes. But what she did is she took the cast of characters she had woven around this main character. And the second series is all from their perspective of what happens next. And so it was fascinating. So, I mean, 5 books. I'm a voracious audiobook guy. I like it because I can listen to them while I'm cleaning, or I like cooking. So, that kind of a thing in the car. And so I just ripped through all of those books. I mean, it was a wild ride. So it's things like that, or like another friend of mine, Jamie Ibsen, had turned me on to John Ringo, Live Free or Die, science fiction. And I was like, wow, I haven't heard of this. And so then I'm, no pun intended, but I mean, I ripped through it. Or Evan Curie, he's got a Space Marine series, and I ripped through all those. It's just like, you get laser focused on the authors that you're so totally used to. And since I got into writing, over the last 5 years, I mean, I've never had wow, I wonder what I'm going to read next, because I have a giant pile of books behind me of all of my author friends when I get them to sign their books. And I get to jump into that. And so it's been fun. But so what am I doing? I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to fill in the holes, but inspiration, it's like, classics like Heinlein. I mean, I love Starship Trooper or The Moon's a Harsh Mistress, getting into Arthur C. Clarke with Childhood's End. I mean, some really dark stuff. Not saying that I write dark stuff, but you read, because you want that human experience.
Yes.
I mean, Childhood's End, I mean, that kind of pulled some strings. I don't know if you've ever read it, but basically,
I'm not familiar with that one. No.
It gets to the notion about racial memory. Why do we think Satan looks like Satan? And then aliens come and tell us that we need to calm down, be nice to each other. And if we're able to be peaceful for a year, then they'll reveal themselves and give us technology. Well, guess what walks down the ramp? Somebody who looks like Satan, our concept of Satan, right? And then they ultimately enslave humanity and destroy it. So then it's like that racial memory of, like tachyons going back in time to, convey that, that's why we had this racial memory. It's just crazy concepts like that. I mean, so that's what I try to do. I've been trying to find all of those classic stories where everybody's like, what do you mean you never read, Ursula Le Guin? Yeah. Well, you need to go fix that. All right, let's go do it. Is it on audio?
Yeah. Well, I can relate completely because until I was talking with more authors and talking with more people who read in the same genres, uh, I found that as much as, like you said, as much as I thought I had been reading fantasy, it had been severely lacking. And I still feel like it is. Like, just talking with you, there's, 6 books that you listed that I haven't read. And, I'll throw them on my to be read pile now, but you know how that goes.
Oh,
Those
sure. I mean,
to
I
be
have a
read
giant one.
piles are going to be, yeah.
And then it's one of those where, I've been reading long enough that there are authors like Jack L. Chalker, so I love, one of my favorite books is River of the Dancing Gods. And
Okay.
so it was in the 80s, and it is isekai. So it's what we consider portal magic, right? I mean, so basically
Mhm.
these two people are driving around down the road, and all of a sudden there's this wizard there, and he takes them off to this land, and it's all about their adventures there. And so I was like, wow, isekai, back portal magic back then, or
Yep.
Barbara Hamley with Time of the Dark. So I'm trying to reread some of those books that I loved back in the 80s 90s, and it's like, wow, or how about this, lit RPG, it's like kind of people
Yep.
are like, oh, it's a new thing. Well, Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes wrote a book called Dream Park in the 80s that is basically lit RPG. It's game lit. I mean,
Yeah.
it is. I mean, it's like they were playing with that back then, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that series. Wow, it's surprisingly relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I think, that could come from, at least I think generally, as humanity and readers, we clump things together more often. But like you said, if you examine individual books from a certain time era, you'll see that it can be very different. I personally was a huge Dragonlance fan, and I
Oh
don't know how
yes.
much of that. I mean, those were the books that when I first read them, those were my first true introduction to fantasy, beyond like the fairy tales and that sort of thing. And I'll still, to this day, for some inspiration or to pick at them, I'll be able to pick them right up and read them like ever. But then, then I feel guilty for not reading something new. So,
Well, and everybody's got like the comfort books, right? I mean,
yes,
Dragonlance got me through
absolutely.
a real tough time. My father had cancer. I was in high
Oh,
school, that kind of
yeah.
a thing. And so, it is always one of those things where, you go back to your comfort books. And
Yeah.
it becomes hard because, and that's the mold I'm trying to break out of, is
Yeah.
what is the Dragonlance of today? I mean, what is the series that you can turn to that's published today that you can reach out to and say, hey, I want that. I want that kind of book. I want that feel. I want that. And I have an answer for you. So I'm involved with 4 other authors in a Dragonlance like experience called Eldros Legacy. And so
Eldros Legacy.
Eldros Legacy. And so
Okay.
we have a short story that's on the website right now. You can pull down and get kind of a taster. And then we basically, as the core authors, have committed to 8 books over the next 8 years each. So that's
Oh,
40
each.
40 books. And then we're bringing other authors into this. So first book will be released December 7th, Kaiven the Unkillable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I post this, I will
Uh-huh.
email you, send me a link, and I can include it so people can check out that short
I'll
story, because
provide
that
you a
sounds like
QR code that people can go to download it.
awesome. Yeah, because these are the type of collaboration projects that I think are just so wild, and that has such potential to not only be a great series, right? But what I always love, like you had mentioned with Dragonlance, right? So you have different flavors coming in from different authors. So you can read, I'm sure you could read a single author's
Yep.
books through,
Single thread.
or you can mash it up together and read them like kind of chronologically. I mean, that's a really neat concept. So yeah, I'll make sure that we get that stuff up so people can check that out too.
Yeah, and our inspiration there is honestly is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, I talk about that before, but the whole notion that you see different characters introduced, Iron Man, Thor, and at the end of it, you have a little Nick Fury weave in. You have the kind of the post trailer thing, and he's the one that stitches all of these stories together.
Yep.
So then that's what we're doing. We actually have our own weave through. So all of these stories from the ground. I mean, we've been working on this since January of this year, and all of these stories are intertwined, and we'll have our own version of Endgame.
That is cool. So so what you're saying is by the end of this, you'll be able to see the end as a whole from different perspectives, essentially, is what you're saying.
Different characters, different lands. Yep. So yeah, absolutely. And so it's been a huge undertaking that we're trying to not just create a core universe for people to play in, but this overarching storyline. And so then give other authors the chance to come in. I mean, like, Dragonlance is one inspiration. Forgotten Realms. I mean, that was the other inspiration. I mean, we're all of us are gamers. And so we have this fantasy, no pun intended, or pun intended maybe, of releasing game modules where people can actually play in this world with these creatures and magic systems and potentially characters, and just have fun with it. Just like, when Dragonlance came out, that was what, 85, 84,
84 maybe. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, then D&D modules followed along. I mean, so where we're kind of doing book first and then modules, D&D was more modules and then books. Books to sell modules.
Maybe it was more of the marketing plan for that. Now, so, and the last thing I'll say about that is for everybody out there, the readers out there, the amount of planning that must have gone into plotting even a general arc, right? Like, so we're not talking about plotting the individual books. The amount of effort and collaboration you guys have went through just to get to the point where you could start writing must have been tremendous.
I mean, imagine. I mean, so I have my map here, and I'll give you guys a kind of a preview here. I've got 17 little kingdoms here, and just went through doing the continent description that talks about each one of these political organizations and how they interrelate and what they produce and all of that stuff. And it's every person, because we have 5 continents, so each person has done that for their continent, and then we have magic that weaves all this together. So I'm not giving away any of the spoilers, but in essence, they all come together. I mean, all of these plot lines come together because of certain magic things that are going to happen.
That's stunning to me, the amount of focus and details that takes. So that's wild. I'm excited for that. That's super cool.
And what's crazy is like I said, I've been playing D&D forever and a day. But you look at like dungeon masters and the amount of effort that they put into crafting their world, and a lot of them have made the transition over into authors. I mean, Raymond Feist is probably the best example. His thing started off as a D&D campaign, and then he started writing books, and then I think he wrote 40 in the Rift War saga. I mean, he's prolific. I had no idea. It's like we talked about, those authors you used to read, go check their list, because you find out, holy cap, Terry Brooks kept writing and writing, and he's got a ton in the Shannara line. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, so Elizabeth Moon, I had no idea she kept writing. And I mean, it's like a delight because you get to revisit the worlds that you grew up with. Dragonlance, there's a bunch of stuff in the Dragonlance stuff.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you heard, but Weiss and Hickman are writing another trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, did you hear about the lawsuit?
Well, yeah, but I haven't heard any of an update on that. But yes,
so they won. They actually won the lawsuit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The Coast backed down. and
Yep.
has to honor their contract. And so I'm very excited to see what they're going to produce.
Oh, I'm pumped. And like you said, that's one of those things you feel like a kid again. Like,
Exactly.
oh yeah, no, that's a great feeling.
I mean, you want to talk about something that would make an awesome series of movies. Netflix, you should pick it up. Hulu, YouTube. I mean, they have production studios. How come
Sure do,
somebody
yeah.
haven't picked that up? I mean, we all loved it.
I don't, yeah, maybe they're clinging on to the rights for it. Maybe that'd be the only thing I could think, but why?
Wizards
I
of the
mean,
Coast, let it go. Make some money.
yeah, exactly.
Entertain
And yeah,
entertain your fans.
yeah. And if you're not going to do with it, like you said, let somebody else step up to the plate and put some money on the table and get it done.
I mean, how much did they pay for the Wheel of Time? I mean, just a
Oh
ridiculous
my,
amount. And then
can't even
Tolkien, I mean,
imagine.
they bought the rights to Tolkien, so they're going to be making that.
Yep. Yeah, that's going to be previous age, I think, or something like
It's going to
that,
be
right?
so
When
awesome.
they do. Yeah, that's going to be great. That's a lot of lore that I think a lot of people will be into.
Well, and, every once in a while, like I watch the Lord of the Rings movies, which I think are fantastic, and I've read the
Yeah.
books. Fellowship of the Ring, I've only made it through it twice in a very long time. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so boring. I think the movie's so much better. But you look at, like, they talk about Aragorn, the last of the Dunedain Rangers. Well, what does that mean? And they never really get into it, right? Nope. Or he talks about how old he is. It's like, what? And then you go into the hole that is Wikipedia. 9 hours later, my wife comes in. Hey, aren't you supposed to be writing?
I am.
Easier if I was looking at porn, because then you get bored with it. It's literary porn. I can't stop.
It is. Yeah, no, it's dangerous. I'm a Brandon Sanderson fan. I mean, most people, right, enjoy his stuff. But I'll tell you, man, you go to like the 17th Shard site, you go to a dozen other sites that, I mean, there's just so, and he's not even halfway done with the Stormlight archives. I mean, can you imagine the wealth of data and information that's going to be out there after that? It's crazy.
Well, I mean, he's got like all of his stuff. I mean, he has a whole house that he does nothing but write in.
Yep. Yeah.
And all, imagine getting into his house and seeing all of his notes and the maps and the crazy cork board with the yarn and all of the things. I mean, he's got to have one.
I like to envision that he just has like a massive army of writing Oompa Loompas, because it doesn't seem fathomable to me that man writes at the pace that he writes. It's incredible. So yeah, I even envisioned that, like, if you were to be a fly on the wall in that house, that like there would be little Oompa Loompas working very diligently all the time.
All the time.
Constantly, 24 hours a day,
course,
no rest.
You look at, like, you and I both have day jobs, and you look at like our day, and there are bits of things that you could, if you had an assistant, and I'm assuming he has an assistant or an army of assistants.
Many, yeah.
But just imagine that you had a person whose whole job in life was to give you more time to write. I mean, hey,
that's true.
I'm out of Diet Coke. Oh, I'll take care of that. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm kind of hungry. Here's a pizza. I mean, it's like, that might be
my
bad.
Phone's ringing. Yeah, I would
be 900 pounds if I had that. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, I got to mow the lawn. Right. Hey, I got a guy for that. Need to walk the dog. Yeah, I'll take care of that for you. All right. I guess I gotta sling some words now.
Yeah. But, and though, like we look at that now and we laugh because he does have all that. But if I remember correctly, he was, a hotel night clerk at a desk when he started taking this and was writing seriously. So, that's how it starts. And that's the dream we all hope for.
Well, he came and talked to Kevin Anderson runs a seminar every February in Colorado Springs called the Superstars Writing Seminar. That's where I got to meet Brandon Sanderson. And he talked about that. And he talked about getting a job that basically allowed him to write. Or like Jim Butcher, I met him at the same seminar. He did tech support, nighttime tech support for an internet company in Missouri or someplace like that, in Missouri or Kansas, one of those. I want to say Missouri, where they gave him time to write. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and I jokingly say I have a creativity tube of toothpaste I'm given every morning, and I use it at work. I have to come up with solutions, and I do development, and work with customers, in the call center space to help them, have more meaningful interaction with their customers. And
Right.
so at the end of the day, when I start writing, I've got whatever's left in that tube. So imagine having a job that has no creativity. I'm no offense to anybody that does tech support or night clerk at a
Yeah.
hotel, but come on, really, you're not solving problems. You
No,
might
not
be
really.
solving maintenance problems or calling the maintenance guy, or the fact that I need an extra pillow because I'm soft and I'm spoiled like that. But when it comes down to it, it's like, do you have a job where you can support your writing?
Yeah.
And right now I do not. I mean, I'm really good at what I do, but ultimately at some point I want to transition out of a day job and write full time. So that way I get the full tube of toothpaste. I mean, so that's the other thing, right?
Yeah.
Full-time authors. I mean, I have a writer friend, Kevin McLaughlin, and he has the
Hmm.
philosophy. I mean, this dude's prolific. I mean, this dude is like lightning on a keyboard. And his philosophy is, if you're gonna work at being a full-time author, then you need to type full-time. So this dude puts out 100,000 words a month. I mean,
Woo.
wow, that
Yeah.
that is
Wow.
that is 3 months of Mark's life. And this guy can do it in a month. But I mean, he's
Yeah.
very, very humble. I love him to death. Love you, Kevin. He just moved to Iceland. I mean, of all places. So his
Yeah.
writing career just allowed him to pick up and go. I mean, I've been to Iceland and it's ultimately cool. And I saw this much of it, and he gets to live it every day. I mean, that's so cool. And so I
That is
want that.
cool.
I want that. And
Yeah.
what's really fun is that, and this is why I love this community, is that guys like you are here to help other authors get a leg up.
Yeah.
And it's truly the rising tide lifts all boats. And so, I'm trying to spend my time with, the junior authors that may not be as skilled. Not that I know everything, but, I help coach them, host little writing get-togethers and, weekly Zoom session with some other writers, mostly from the Chris Kennedy Publishing Group. I mean, and it's amazing because if you have a problem, they're there to help you. All the way across this. And most recently, I don't mean to plug names all the time, but there's a group for us, people like us, called 20 Books to 50K.
Yeah.
And they truly have the mentality. Every day I look at their Facebook group and they've got some nugget of information on there that I'm able to learn. And I love
Every
that.
day.
Every day.
It's every single, multiple times a day.
And
Yeah.
questions. I mean, Michael Anderley and Craig Martell do a fantastic job of disseminating the information and keeping it pure and keeping it helpful, right? And they are wonderful people. And I don't know if you go to their conference. They're coming up in
This will be my
November.
first year.
Are you going to be there?
I was going to go last year, and with everything that happened, that got canned, but I'm definitely going to be there. I'm excited.
So all of you out there that are thinking about writing, you should totally go to this. It'll be the cheapest conference where you get the most out of it. And if you want a taster, go onto YouTube and go 20 Books Vegas 2019. All of the sessions are free. They're all recorded, they're all up there. And Ryan, I'll buy you a beer at the bar.
I can't wait. That's exciting.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great. And, just to piggyback on what you said, I also can't say enough about that group. I like to, when I talk about it, I say I would, and I'm still in my infancy in writing, right? But I still feel like I wouldn't be.
I just learned how to crawl.
Yeah. So, and it sounds like you sound the same way. I don't think I would be this far without having found that group. It really has been that instrumental in understanding some of the nuances, knowing what to focus on and what not to focus on, which is a huge thing. So,
I mean, watching other people touch the hot stove is important.
Very important. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and it sounds like we'll be able to get these computers out from between us then. So that's exciting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So before we wrap this up, why don't you talk? I know we talked about the books a little bit, but why don't you really give us anything else that you want to close with? What's next? I know the Animals is in progress. So
yes, so that is my goal. My goal is to have Animals done. I'm shooting for the end of the month.
Mhm.
I'm going to push pretty hard. Productivity, I do about 2,500 words a day. So I think I can make it. And then after that is going to be my first book in the Eldros Legacy. And so it is
Very
called
good.
The Forgotten King. And so it would be out in March. And so if you guys are interested in science fiction and fantasy, I would encourage you to check out a conference in Raleigh that happens in March. It's called Fantasy. And no, I don't get paid for, recruiting people to go to it. But, I've been 2 years. It's been held 2 years. Unfortunately, there was a break in the middle. It was on one of the first cons that got canceled for COVID. But that first year, that was where I got to meet Timothy Zahn. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing cooler than looking down the hallway of a hotel and a unit of stormtroopers from the 501st comes trooping down your hotel corridor. That was just freaking awesome. I mean,
That is cool.
but I mean, it's chock full of things like that. Larry Correa was there, David Weber's there, Chris Kennedy, Kevin Eikenberry. I mean, you get all kinds of people from all different genres. I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, science fiction and fantasy in a very small setting, because I think it was less than 200 people that showed up this year.
Oh,
And it's just amazing.
Intimate. Like that's
Very
intimate. Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I got to sit there and talk with Larry Correa about how one of his noir magic series are being turned into a TV show. He was able to announce that right there.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you have a favorite author, then I mean, go to this thing. I mean, I'm a big fan of cons. Yes, I know everybody's afraid of getting sick, but I'll tell you what, I mean, hand sanitizer, take your vitamins, wash your hands, don't touch your face, go meet people.
Yeah. No, and I mean, the thing is, right, like you talked about, there's a lot to worry about, but you can't let it completely overshadow like what there is to gain to, right? Like, and these are experiences. Like, that's why I'm still looking forward to the 20 Books Conference. These are experiences that you can't duplicate online.
And I went to go get a cheeseburger, and I'm sitting at the bar, and the guy next to me is Shane Silvers. And if you guys don't know Shane Silvers, you should look him up. He basically is a 7-figure author for urban fantasy. And the dude is the nicest guy on the planet. Nicest guy on the planet. Yeah, he can't pick me out of the crowd from Adam, but that I had that experience of, the fact that you're literally right next to a guy having chit chat while you're having a cheeseburger. I mean, it's just amazing. You can't get that anywhere else.
No. And that's where, that's what all of us aspire to be, right? At the top of our craft doing it. So to be able to sit down and have a conversation with people who are living it. I mean, that's, and like you said, everybody involved in that group is there to help people who need the help. I mean, it really is, like you said, rising tide
lifts all boats.
Boats. So
and I'm a firm believer, just like everybody's helped me. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am without James Hunter or Kevin Eikenberry. Yeah. I'm trying to reach my hand back to help the guy behind me up the mountain. I mean, we're all there. We're not competing with each other.
No.
I mean, here's the truth of it. I can't write fast enough to keep my fans happy. I need you. I need you to be looking at Wuxia. I need you to put out some books because my fans need candy bars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, think about how much people read. Like you said, if we're publishing 2 a year, right? Maybe you're even publishing 3 a year.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to read your book in a couple days if they're that into it.
Absolutely.
That's a whole lot of other time reading that they have.
I mean, I used to burn a book down in a day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, yes, I wouldn't do anything else during that day, but right. I could kill a book in about 6 to 8 hours.
Yep.
And so, okay, then what's going to happen for the other 364 days of the year? I need a couple more of you guys to start writing.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And something that people lose sight of. It's not a competition at all. And the better quality authors that you have around you writing in the same space, that's again something that lifts
push the bar up. Look what happened with Lit RPG. I mean, those guys I mean, they started writing books and putting out great stories and then putting out great covers and then now better stories and better covers. And
The genre's exploded.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in fact,
absolutely.
They're going to get their own category. Yeah, isn't that awesome?
I think rightfully so. Yeah.
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 So Wuxia, if you need help, ping me.
That's
I'll
right.
help you. I'll point you in the right direction.
That's right. That's awesome. So before we close it out, what would you like to say to the readers out there?
Well, for the readers out there, thank you for participating in our stories. I mean, without your stories, I mean, you know, you guys are the ones funding us to have hopefully a better life. I mean, for me, you know, reading got me through hard times, and I just hope I can tell a story that will get you through a hard time.
That's well said. Well said, Mark. So everybody, Mark Stallings, you see his info up there. And then of course, at the end of this, I'll make sure I get any of the other links, a QR code for the download. And we'll make sure you have everything you need to get some of Mark's stories and some wuxia into your reading repertoire.
Absolutely. And if you guys happen to be in Bally's in November, you'll find Ryan and I at the bar.
Right. We'll buy you a beer.
Or two.
Or two. Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. So as always, get out there, discover new worlds, and we'll see you next time. I want to give another big shout out to Mark for joining us today. If you're anything like me, you really enjoyed getting to learn about his inspirations for his fantasy, along with some of his really cool projects he's got coming up. So thank you again, Mark. As far as us over here at World Hoppers, make sure you hit subscribe. We have some really great episodes coming up featuring some new other fantasy authors and an in-person recording in Lafayette, New Jersey at Black Dog Books. So stay tuned, guys, and I'll see you next time. Get out there and discover new worlds.